me because I'm not really feeling like listening to music, so I'm gonna mute myself and play a podcast. It's kind of a like depressing podcast, I guess, so it'll go nicely with the horror stuff that I'm sculpting. But before I turn that on, the one thing I do want to show y'all up front in this video is how I make a hand. So I have this pre-made hand I'm gonna just like slap on to the sculpture I'm using. But I just want to show y'all the finger block out. So the way you can size a finger, it follows the golden ratio with like each bone getting smaller proportionately. So if you just make a cylinder and then stack it on itself 3 times, so you have 4 of them, then the next one will be roughly 3 cylinders of the same size, and the last one will be roughly 2 cylinders of the same size. And then what's cool about that is your palm is the same size as your fingers, and the fingers and the palm are like overlap a little bit. That gives you your knuckles, so it ends up being a little bit off. But yeah, since I'm not taking the time to show y'all how to sculpt an entire hand, I thought I'd at least talk about that. And then, you know, I'd like put a deformer on the palm to give it that curve, and the thumb rotates. The thumb's the same size as the rest of the fingers, but you place it by the palm and then rotate it 90 degrees. Here, I could actually probably show y'all this. I might as well demonstrate this really quickly. So, and I'll sculpt out a little. Well, here. There we go. So it's on. What brush am I on? There we go. I didn't switch my brushes the first time I hit my little hotkey. We'll just use that as our like mock fingernail. So to place your thumb, well, I drew that not perfectly on top, but let's say your fingernail's on top. You'd rotate it 90 degrees this way, and then 45 degrees this way, and you would want to do that from down here, which obviously I'll move that back into place since I didn't do that. So you'd go 90 around, 45 out, and then kind of 45 like there-ish. Yeah, you can see that's kind of how I got my thumb into position. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Awesome. This too. Like whole hand or something. Sweet. Yeah, maybe I will just start with the hands. So I'm going to copy this over to my other tool where I got my main sculpt going on. I should probably take the time to clean this out here soon. Just some of this stuff, like this. I can get rid of this, we don't need this anymore. This. Am I using this as a projector? Do I still need it? Is the real question. Excuse me, what? Yes, that is my main one. Alright. I don't know why I have this one. I never reprojected. Alright, well, I guess we'll start there. I'll paste that in before I forget about it. Whoa. is it so off scale? No, it's going to be the other hand. Let's put it flat. Cool. Alright. I am going to go ahead, mute myself, start playing the podcast.
Dr. James Grigson and the broader industry, cottage industry he helps ignite of psychiatrists who go to court and be like, yeah, man, absolutely kill that motherfucker. Which is only slightly less direct than the actual job was. With us again, our guest, Stephen Monticelli. Stephen, how you doing?
I'm doing.
You doing?
I'm doing. Well, yeah, I'm here.
Mm-hmm. What
Mm-hmm.
are you
But
doing?
we're about to talk about some really, really uplifting, heartening,
Mm-hmm.
trust-inducing stuff. Like makes me really love the system and the
Yeah.
medical profession as a whole.
It's good. I mean, here's the thing. What's frustrating is the medical profession as a whole is trying to do the right thing here. Like they keep being like, "This guy's a crank. This guy's a crank." It just doesn't matter for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is kind of an early example of the hell we're in now, where it's like all of the people who know anything about, for example, climate, or for example, how infectious diseases work, or anything else to do with like vaccines and medicine, all of these like people who know things, space travel, people who know things about that are being like, nah, this is really fucked up. Like you're shooting us in the foot. All of these different cuts to research are horrible. Everything that's being done is going to make life worse for everybody. But the only people that matter are the ones who are saying "nuh-uh," and you kind of get an early version. This is like a prologue for all of the hell that we're in right now. This like anti-science bullshit. Well, I feel like a good psychiatrist should be able to say, "Oh yeah, this man is definitely going to kill again because I've diagnosed him with something I believe, thanks to TV, is a real diagnosis." This is our like Star Wars prequel of the anti-science hell that we're all trapped in now.
Yeah, the sort of non-expert expert, the person
Mm-hmm.
who is more than willing to set aside all of the good things about whatever field they nominally belong to in order to like push some sort of quackery or ideology.
Yeah.
It's we've seen it in a lot of fields, unfortunately, and to
Yeah.
horrible extents, like the Russians with their,
Mm-hmm.
was it Lamarckism, if I'm
Oh God, no,
remembering the name correctly.
Lysenkoism.
Lysenkoism. Sorry,
Mm.
Lysenkoism. I'm certainly not an expert in the history of genetic research, but I digress. Yeah, really, really horrible person here that we're talking
Yeah,
about today.
it is interesting to compare it to Lysenkoism, which is like you had obviously actual agricultural scientists in the USSR, and then you had this guy being like, "No, plants work the same way we're pretty sure people do," you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you can like freeze a crop and it'll pass down cold resistance to. It's like no, that doesn't. And there were a lot of people saying no, that doesn't work, but the scientists who happen to be in alignment with the politics of the people in charge was the scientist who got declared to be right, and damn the consequences. And likewise here, you've got the whole APA being like, at no point should psychiatrists ever do what this guy is doing, right? But you've got people in Texas and prosecutors and the government of Texas being like, no, this is pretty much how we think it should work. So this guy's right, and he gets to make a lot of money.
Right.
It's great.
Conveniently a tool of the state and its
Yeah,
interest at the time.
yeah, it's great.
This is an iHeart podcast. life's messy. We're talking spills, stains, pets, and kids. But with Anababe, you never have to stress about messes again. At WashableSofas.com, discover Anababe sofas, the only fully machine-washable sofas inside and out, starting at just $699. Made with liquid and stain-resistant fabrics. That means fewer stains and more peace of mind. Designed for real life, our sofas feature changeable fabric covers, allowing you to refresh your style anytime. Need flexibility? Our modular design lets you rearrange your sofa effortlessly. Perfect for cozy apartments or spacious homes. Plus, they're earth-friendly and built to last. That's why over 200,000 happy customers have made the switch. Upgrade your space today. Visit WashableSofas.com now and bring home a sofa made for life. That's WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change and certain restrictions may apply.
Every case that is a cold case that has DNA right now in a backlog will be identified in our lifetime.
On the new podcast, America's Crime Lab, every case has a story to tell, and the DNA holds the truth.
He never thought he was going to get caught. And I just looked at my computer screen. I was just like, gotcha.
This technology is already solving so many cases.
Listen to America's Crime Lab on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, I'm John Lithgow.
We choose to go to the moon.
I want to tell you about my new fiction podcast.
It's one small step for man.
About Buzz Aldrin, one of the true pioneers of space.
You're a great pilot, Buzz.
That's the story you think you know. This is the story you don't. Buzz, starring me, John Lithgow. On the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Going to nursing school can change your life, but that doesn't mean it's easy. You have commitments, family, a job. At Galen College of Nursing, we understand that, which is why we provide one-to-one tutoring support and assigned academic advisors who will work with you to keep you on track from day one. You can change the course of your life and the lives of people counting on you. Because we believe the better we care for nursing students now, the brighter the future of nursing will be. Galen, the now approach to nursing education. Join us at galencollege.edu.
So from this point forward in the story, our boy Dr. Grigson, aka Dr. Death, is going to continue to expand and extend his practice throughout the 80s, while also dealing with constant and mounting criticism from organized psychiatry as a field. Now, the core of the complaints against him have to do with his continued insistence on using the results of competency tests, which he's not supposed to be doing, right? But there's some evidence that he keeps doing it after he's told not to by the Supreme Court. And then kind of the bigger issue is, again, that he's making predictions about the future, which he shouldn't be doing. Even after being chided by the APA in that Supreme Court case, he continued to rank sociopathy on a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the worst. And as noted in an article by the Death Penalty Information Center, he would regularly rank people higher than 10. Like the 1 through 10 seemed to be like mostly pointless because he would always go above 10, right? And up to 12, 13, and even 14, which is just what, like, again, like if you're going to go above 10 on a 1 to 10, yeah, you just say like, oh, he's an 11, like a 14. So why even have a 1 to 10 scale if someone could be that high above it? What are you doing? Like, why even introduce that idea from the beginning? I promise I'm not going to beat on that the whole time. It's just very frustrating to me. Now, these numbers are, again, infuriating if you know anything about psychiatry or probability, but they get even more sickening when you dig into the actual stories of the people that Dr. Grigson diagnosed as 100% sociopaths who would 100% kill again. He is often saying a 99% chance they'll kill again. Sometimes he says 100% chance they'll kill again, right? And we know that in a lot of cases he was objectively wrong. And because we have examples like, and this is probably the most prominent case of him being wrong, the tale of Randall Dale Adams. In 1977, Adams was convicted of the murder of a Dallas, Texas police officer, Robert Wood. Officer Wood was shot to death in late 1976, the same year that Texas finally established its new rules for deciding death penalty cases. Now, we know who the actual shooter was. It was a guy named David Harris who framed Randall Adams to avoid being convicted of the crime. Adams's conviction relied heavily on testimony from 3 witnesses who were illegally hidden from the defense until they showed up in court. And said testimony, we also know, was at least partially perjured. So not only did the defense hide these witnesses when they shouldn't have, but the witnesses were coaxed and bribed into giving false testimony. And we know this, right? So we're already starting with crimes on the part of the prosecution in this case. Now, that begs the question, why are the police and why is the prosecutor so gung-ho to go after a guy with evidence they know, like that they know they're having to cook up, right? That they know isn't true. And you would assume, just knowing cops, it's because, like, you know, police just for whatever reason decided this was the guy. And we're like, well, we can just kind of coax the truth into making sure that we are able to, like, make a stronger case. And the prosecutor went along with it, right? That's actually not what happened. So what's really going on here is that David Harris, the guy who actually kills this person in this robbery gone wrong, um, is 16 years old, right? And they know Harris does it from the beginning. He's the first guy they take into custody. They find that the gun that was used in the shooting was his dad's gun that he had access to that night. So it's very clear that this is Harris, but you can't give a 16-year-old the death penalty in Texas, right? And it's a cop he's murdered. And so the police, even more than making sure the right guy gets executed, the police want to make sure that when a cop gets murdered, someone gets executed, right?
Right.
And when it becomes clear Harris can't be executed, Harris is like, well, I'll give you this other guy who, like, drove me there, right? And Randall Adams, part of why Adams is a good patsy to pin it on is that Daryl Harris is like a kid. He, like, lives with his parents, so he's someone who has something of, like, a normal life. And Randall Adams is a drifter, right? He's like doing day labor. He doesn't come from the state. He's kind of, you know, I think he has a car, but he's essentially a homeless man, right? And so it's really easy to kill him, right? And really easy to, like, kill him because he's not going to have any kind of money for defense and because he's not the kind of person anyone's going to care about, right? So this kind of fits what the cops want, which is we want to make a show of force against somebody for the death of this cop. Now, there's a lot of fucked up details in the case. Everything that happens here, there's a lot of, like, rule breaking and illegality we don't have enough time to go into, but every detail of this case stinks about as much as it's possible for a case to stink from the get-go. In the end, the jury declares Adams guilty after almost no deliberation. And as you know, because we've done our little clinic on how the Texas death penalty worked, the next step is they have to decide, should this man die, right? And this always comes down to, will he commit another violent crime if we leave him alive? Determining this case came down to Dr. Grigson and another colleague testifying about whether or not Adams was, in Dr. Grigson's terms, a maximum sociopath. Again, not a diagnosis. But Grigson testified that Randall would 100% kill again if left alive. Adams, he insisted, was an extreme sociopath, so he can't even keep his terms straight. Adams is sentenced to die in 1979. And the years tick by agonizingly, you know, from this court case, until 3 days before his execution, the U.S. Supreme Court stays it, right? They give him a stay of execution because Justice Lewis Powell writes that there is grave concern regarding potential jurors in the case who were excluded for being anti-death penalty, even though they'd promised to follow Texas law if appointed, right? So that's the whole thing that saves his life initially, is that there's an appeal based on, like, jurors who weren't pro-death penalty were excluded illegally from service, right? And so that's the only reason he's saved initially. It has nothing to do with his innocence, nothing to do with other aspects of the case. It's just this issue with the jury. Now, by rights, because this has been found by the Supreme Court, Adams should have gotten a new trial, right? It's been determined that his trial was, like, not valid because the rules were broken here, enough that they stayed his execution. You should have a new trial. But the Dallas DA at the time, Henry Wade, and does that name sound familiar to you, Henry Wade?
Yeah, we talked about him. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure Dr. Phillips and I on one of the episodes on It Could Happen here. Yeah. What
He's
a
the Wade
character.
from Roe v. Wade, right? Like that's the and he's on the bad side of the case, right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Wade, or Henry Wade, not Dr. Wade, the DA comes in and he's like, we don't need to give this guy a new trial. It would be a waste of money, right? And it'll be a waste of money because I'm going to have the governor commute Adams' sentence to life in prison, right? So he's not going to get killed anymore. So why do we care about giving him a new trial, right? So Adams's people are still like, we want a new trial because he's innocent and he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. But a Texas Criminal Court of Appeals insists that, like, well, now that he's not going to be executed, there's no longer any error in the case, so it's fine, right? Because, you know, those jurors were just being excluded because of their opinion on the death penalty. No death penalty, everything's good here. So that's what the Court of Appeals decides.
God, come on.
And so Adams, a man everyone knows has been railroaded into a guilty verdict, a lot of this is out now, and had been nearly executed due to a crooked case, seemed set to spend the rest of his life behind bars. And this is the case that he stays in until March of 1985. And the reason why he gets another shot and ultimately, thank God, I'm going to spoil it a little bit, gets freed is because of, we can thank documentarian Errol Morris. So Errol Morris is paying attention during that 1983 Supreme Court case against Dr. Grigson, and he's like, this seems really fucked up. Like this Dr. Death guy seems like a real asshole who's killing a shitload of people. I wonder if we can do anything about that, you know, me being literally Errol Morris. So he starts working on a documentary that's initially supposed to be primarily about Dr. Grigson. And the documentary that comes out is called The Thin Blue Line, right? If you've heard of that. Like, that is the documentary that he makes about this case ultimately. So Morris starts working on this case, and that obviously brings a lot of attention to it, and you know he's able to put some resources behind it. And to talk about what happened next, I'm going to quote from an article by the Center on Wrongful Convictions at Northwestern University. Morris's intent had not been to question the guilt of defendants in whose cases Grigson had testified, but only to question his psychiatric conclusions. When Morris met Adams, the focus of the project changed. Morris learned from Randy Schaefer, a volunteer Houston lawyer who had been working on the case since 1982, that Harris had not led an exemplary life after helping to convict Adams. Harris, which is the guy who gives Adams up, had joined the army and been stationed in Germany, where he had been convicted in a military court of a series of burglaries and sent to prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. A few months after his release, Harris had been convicted in California of kidnapping, armed robbery, and related crimes. So Morris is like, well, the guy who said Adams was guilty in the first place and had been the initial suspect really seems like the kind of guy who'd murder a cop, whereas Adams doesn't. And there's a bunch of other irregularities in the case. The more he looks into it, the more he finds. For one thing, it comes up again that Harris's father had owned the gun that was likely used in the shooting and that Harris had stolen it. Now, this is all looking pretty bad, but what comes up next is even worse, and I'm going to continue quoting from that article. Morris and Schaefer discovered that Officer Turco, who's one of that's the officer that survives, her partner is killed, and she testifies about the murder, that Officer Turco had been hypnotized during the investigation and initially had acknowledged that she had not seen the killer, facts that the prosecution had illegally withheld from the defense. Morris and Schaefer also found that robbery charges against the daughter of eyewitness Emily Miller had been dropped after Miller agreed to testify Adams as Woods' killer. The new information, coupled with the fact that Miller initially had described the killer as Mexican or African American, became the basis for a new trial motion, right? So they find all this shit is fucked up, and like there's not really any evidence whatsoever that ties Adams to the murder. And ultimately, you know, there's a new trial motion. The case becomes a major cornerstone for the Death Row Innocence Project, like movement, right? For the people who are trying to, you know, especially as forensic science is advancing, and we've got DNA now, trying to look at a lot of these people who are definitely innocent and get them off death row, get them out of prison. So in 1988, during a 3-day hearing in a Dallas district court, Harris finally recants and admits that he killed the cop that Adams was convicted of murdering. The judge in that case recommends a new trial for Adams and that Adams be paroled immediately in the meantime. The Board of Pardons and Appeals initially refuses to let Adams out, but agrees to a new trial. And then after like a couple of weeks, he gets released anyway. And then a few days later, all charges against him are dropped. And I think this is a case of, as soon as they looked back into it, they were like, oh, there's no case whatsoever. Without the shit that the cops and the prosecutors falsified, there's absolutely nothing. We can't even give him a new trial. Like, there's not enough to even try and accuse him of here.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it's good, right? This is an innocent man gets out of prison,
right?
You know, after having his life saved.
Ridiculous that it got that had to get to that point.
Yeah. So it's a major win, obviously. Randall Adams and everyone who believed in his innocence, you know, scratch up a W. But this represents a serious problem for Dr. Grigson because he had guaranteed in court that this man was an incurable sociopath who would 100% kill again. So people start asking him, like, hey, you said this innocent guy was definitely a sociopath. Were you wrong? This is part of why I love that Vanity Fair piece where Rosenbaum spent like weeks traveling with Dr. Death, because this is written in 1990, but it's during a period of time in which he keeps getting questioned about Adams, because Adams is just like freed in '88. So Grigson is still testifying constantly, and defense attorneys are using this against him. Unfortunately, it's less successful at hurting his testimony than you might imagine. Now, this part in that Vanity Fair article comes after Grigson has just testified in one of 3 death penalty cases. He's doing in like a long weekend with the goal of getting 3 people killed, right? He's trying to kill the most people that he's ever killed in his career in the shortest period of time. Like, that's what this article is about. He's got like 3 cases in a couple of days. He's like, can I break my record of, getting people executed by the state? So during one of these cases, he's testifying, and the defense attorney asks, "Do you recall the Randall Dale Adams case?" The doctor nodded warily and said, "I recall it well, yes, sir. Are you as sure about this defendant as you were when you declared Randall Dale Adams was guilty and would kill again?" Again, the courtroom tensed up. Even out on the prairie, the papers had reported on the Adams case. Looking totally unperturbed, the doctor said dramatically, "Those people that were involved in the case know that he is guilty. I examined Mr. Adams. There is no question in my mind, as well as the mind of the jury who convicted him, that he is guilty." "And did you say of Randall Adams that he will continue his previous behavior?" "I most certainly said that," the doctor said defiantly, "and he will." Right? So that's 2 years later. He's like, no, they were wrong. He's definitely still guilty. I know it because of my psychiatry brain, and I guarantee you he's going to kill again. Right?
It just hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet, but it 100% will. Right? Now, Rosenbaum talks to the doctor after this case, which the prosecution wins, even though this gets brought up. And he's like, talks to him about Adams. He's like, it just seems really weird that you're insisting this guy is still guilty after all the evidence that Morris uncovered and the fact that the legal system backpedaled. And Dr. Grigson is like, no. The guy's guilty. Harris only recanted and took credit for the murder because he wanted to jack the system around, right? And in another trial a week later, when asked the same question, Dr. Grigson continued to insist that not only was Adams guilty, but again, he will 100% kill again. Like that I am 100% sure this now free man will commit another murder. Like he testified that. So that seems like a pretty good case to judge his credibility on, given that this is happening in 1990 and we have 25 years of additional data into this guy's life, right? Seems like something we should look into, which we will after these ads.
Wow, that was so professional.
That was a good one.
Thank you. I try.
Life's messy. We're talking spills, stains, pets, and kids. But with Anababe, you never have to stress about messes again. At washablesofas.com, discover Anababe sofas, the only fully machine washable sofas inside and out, starting at just $699. Made with liquid and stain-resistant fabrics. That means fewer stains and more peace of mind. Designed for real life, our sofas feature changeable fabric covers, allowing you to refresh your style anytime. Need flexibility? Our modular design lets you rearrange your sofa effortlessly. Perfect for cozy apartments or spacious homes. Plus, they're earth-friendly and built to last. That's why over 200,000 happy customers have made the switch. Upgrade your space today. Visit washablesofas.com now and bring home a sofa made for life. That's washablesofas.com. Offers are subject to change and certain restrictions may apply.
A foot washed up a shoe with some bones in it. They had no idea who it was.
Most everything was burned up pretty good from the fire, that not a whole lot was salvageable.
These are the coldest of cold cases, but everything is about to change.
Every case that is a cold case that has DNA right now in a backlog will be identified in our lifetime.
A small lab in Texas is cracking the code on DNA. Using new scientific tools, they're finding clues in evidence so tiny you might just miss it.
He never thought he was going to get caught. And I just looked at my computer screen. I was just like, gotcha.
On America's Crime Lab, we'll learn about victims and survivors. And you'll meet the team behind the scenes at Othram, the Houston lab that takes on the most hopeless cases, to finally solve the unsolvable. Listen to America's Crime Lab on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
How could could a beautiful young first grade teacher be stabbed 20 times, including in the back, allegedly die of suicide? Yes, that was the medical examiner's official ruling. After a closed door meeting, he first named it a homicide. Why? What happened to Ellen Greenberg? A huge American miscarriage of justice. For an in depth look at the facts, see What Happened to Ellen on Amazon. All proceeds to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Preparing for the new school year is a great opportunity to prioritize health for the whole family, and South Coast Health is here to help. From pediatrics to geriatrics, from sore throats to surgery, from well visits to urgent care, and everything in between, South Coast Health is your partner for total wellness for life. Make South Coast Health a partner for better living for your family at southcoasthealth.com. That's southcoasthealth.com.
We're back. So you could say, I think it'd be fair to say, that a lot of Dr. Grigson's credibility rests on the Randall Adams case, right? Because number one, this is a guy he said was definitely guilty, who then got exonerated. And number two, he has now provided in 1990, he said 100% he'll kill again now that he's free. That's a falsifiable statement, and we have a lot of time since 1990 to kind of look at. And about 14 years after he made that statement in 2004, there was a study. I found an article about it based on the study by the Texas Defender Service into the records of 155 convicted killers to determine how often they actually engaged in violent behavior post-conviction and what Dr. Grigson and other experts had predicted they would do, right? So these guys are looking into like, what can we actually tell based on the predictions made about these convicted killers and what they actually did, how accurate these predictions were, right? So, you know, that's good. Now I'm gonna quote from that now. Adams 55 is Exhibit A in a study to be released today that found experts' witnesses' predictions of violent behavior were wrong 95% of the time.
Oh, God.
So that's way worse than a third, right?
Exactly.
That's like, you know, statistically significant confidence interval. Like you
Right.
basically can say it's going to happen.
Yeah. Like that is, you would think if you and I were just guessing, if we just got to go to court and like flip a coin and be like, yeah, that guy will kill again, like you'd expect us to be righter than that.
Yep.
Oh, boy.
That's an incredible degree of wrong, right? So of the 155 convicted killers studied, only 8 engaged in later behavior that resulted in serious injury. So 8 out of 155 seriously hurt another person after their conviction. A full 20% of these convicts had 0 disciplinary violations while in prison of any kind, and 75% had only minor nonviolent infractions like owning lottery tickets, right? So like, yeah, a bunch of them got in trouble after conviction, but it was because like they had an illegal lottery ticket. It wasn't because they were killing or hurting anybody. Not one of the 155 convicted killers ever murdered again, right? So very bad like rate of accuracy here. Now, it's important to note this is 2004, which is after Dr. Grigson dies and well after he stopped practicing. But it's important to note that even at the end of the 1980s, the early 1990s, there's good documented evidence that not only had Grigson been wrong on a case, but during his whole career, he'd very likely been wrong on a grand scale. I want to quote from a 2003 article for the Washington Times here. Andrea Kellen, an attorney with the Texas Defender Service, said she knew of dozens of former death row inmates whose sentences were reduced for various reasons and who have never been involved in any difficulties, though Dr. Grigson testified they should be executed because they would likely commit murder again. In 1988, a report compiled by an assistant district attorney in Dallas concluded that after the study of 11 specific death penalty verdicts where the defendant's terms had been reduced, not a single one had been anything other than a model prisoner. Mr. Halperin, in a brief for other prisoners, concluded that despite Dr. Grigson's near-identical predictions that each inmate would beyond any doubt absolutely and without any question commit acts of dangerousness in the future, that prosecution-prepared report proved the psychiatrist was seldom accurate. So, a DA report, this is a prosecutor, did a study of 11 death penalty verdicts where Dr. Grigson said they will definitely continue to commit crimes if not executed. And these people were not executed. Their sentences were reduced, and none of them did violence again. That's 100% wrong for Dr. Grigson, right? Based on those 11 cases, you know?
Jesus.
So I'm not overly optimistic that he was right a bunch of the time that we don't have data on based on that and based on the Adams case. Um, so, going into the 90s here, though, despite the fact that there is evidence building that Dr. Grigson is wrong an awful lot, he is continuing to do a shitload of these cases and to be very prominent in the media. And the Adams case does nothing initially to slow his career or halt his body count. There was, however, a minor uproar as a result of Morris's documentary and Adams's exoneration. In 1993, the Texas State Supreme Court responded to the epidemic of junk science experts, but only in civil cases. So they ruled that expert testimony could only be admitted if it was proven to be both relevant and reliable, a bar that Dr. Grigson's work could not pass, as if any psychiatrist not named Dr. Grigson were consulted on the matter. However, this only applied to civil cases, like I said, not capital cases. So there's an uproar, but it only stops psychiatrists from testifying in the cases that Dr. Grigson isn't testifying in. Now, there is still an uproar, even in Texas, about this. There are a lot of professionals that are angry about what Grigson is doing. It's just not able to stop things. Like, one of the things I found that was really wild is John Edens, who was a professor of psychiatry at my alma mater, Sam Houston State, said in the wake of this 93 decision of Dr. Grigson, it's hard to imagine this kind of testimony would be allowed. It does not meet the criteria of reliability. There is a known error rate, which is remarkably high. So again, Sam Houston State, not a liberal university. This is the criminal justice school in Texas, right? Like, this is not, it's located right next to death row, right?
Why is there nothing? Why are we just letting this happen then?
Because any ruling against Dr. Grigson could be seen as attempting to like slow the death penalty. And it's really popular, unfortunately. And we're coming into the Bush years now, right? Dr. Grigson is going to be really active during Bush's time as governor. And so like we're kind of ramping up in the 90s to the period where Texas is like considering its ability to continue its death row as like this is like something that is really important to the state, right? It's something we take a degree of pride in, like my family did, you know? So it's not like the fact that all of these experts are very much saying this guy is not reliable is not hurting his business yet.
So crazy.
And it's also prosecutors have a lot of power, a lot of political power.
Right.
DAs have a lot of political power and they find him useful.
So he was too important of a cog in a bigger machine.
Right. He's really politically useful and he's useful to all their careers, right? Because a lot of these prosecutors, part of what they're building their careers on, a lot of them want to go into other politics, is like, not only do I have this many convictions, but I sent this many dangerous sociopaths to death row, right? I made our state safer.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's one of those things where, yeah, if you put numbers up on the board, it sounds good. You can claim that you took dangerous repeat criminals who would have been threats to their communities off the streets. And then if you succeed in actually killing them, you don't face the scrutiny of what you just described, of whether or not they actually would live up to that potential future that's been predicted by this expert.
Yep.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is cool, right? We're happy? Yeah.
Works as expected, right? The purpose of a system is what it does.
Right. And in this case, the system is doing exactly what the people who set it up want it to do. Dr. James Grigson in 1995 was finally drummed out of the APA for his continued insistence on diagnosing subjects without ever talking to them. The next year, the Texas Society of Psychiatric Physicians expelled him. In 1996, New York University psych professor Michael Weiner wrote this. The problem with Dr. Grigson was not that inmates were placed on death row, but that he was fundamentally biased in his assessments and was performing cursory evaluations and drawing broad and damning conclusions from only limited information, a problem of credibility and objectivity. And, I would say part of the problem is that people were being placed on death row based on bad evidence. But I think he's making the point that, like, Dr. Grigson isn't responsible for the way prosecutions work, for how bad, like, lying about the evidence is incentivized in these cases and stuff. He's responsible for this aspect of it, which is probably fair to say. Now, it is impossible for us to know to a point of certainty how often he was wrong, But something like 100 of the people he testified about for money were put to death, and most of those cases were never revisited. However, we do have a few more case studies on times when he was proven wrong. Back in 1986, a carpenter named David Wayne Stoker was charged with the murder of a convenience store clerk north of Lubbock. 5 months after the murder, a man described by prosecutors as low-life scum snitched to police that Stoker had done the murder and handed over what he claimed to be the murder weapon. Well, this low-life scum had the murder weapon and says this other guy did it. That's all I need to know.
Case closed.
Why would he have a bias, right? So Stoker did have an assault prior, and he had a drug issue, right? And was arrested in short order. Again, it's one of these like, oh yeah, this guy doesn't have any way to fight this. Yeah, let's go after him. Like many such death penalty cases, his was dogged by poor quality representation and a system in which people like him, who are expected to be guilty, get railroaded through to a conviction. Per an article by the Death Penalty Information Center, Felty, the lead lawyer, the defense attorney, and a former prosecutor, later gave up his law license in the face of disciplinary action. Felty forged the signatures of 2 clients on a settlement check, then pocketed the money, records show. He also pleaded guilty to felony charges for forging a judge's signature on a court order and falsifying a government document. He was sentenced to 5 years of community service. So that's this guy's defense attorney. And again, not shitting on the concept of defense attorneys, but it's a major problem that a lot of these guys in particular, these are the kind of the lowest of the low, and they benefit from the very worst service on average, right? They are very likely to get the defense attorneys who are not competent. It's, as we'll talk about, weirdly common for like death penalty cases for the defense attorneys to later get disbarred for incompetence or other similar issues. The guy who had snitched on Stoker claimed in court to not have been given anything for his testimony, that just like, I wanted the truth to come out, I didn't get any kind of special deal. But the day he testified, charges he had for drug possession and for like possession of a firearm illegally in the next county over were dropped, and he received $1,000 from Crime Stoppers as a reward for turning this guy in. And further documents made it clear that there had been a written quid pro quo with the DA. For one thing, that county didn't have a Crime Stoppers program until it was started for this by the DA, and the check was sent to him by an investigator for the DA's office.
Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff.
Not bribery, though. Not bribery.
No, not picking cases that you think can win, even if it might not be the right guy. And certainly no shenanigans or bribery with regard to acquiring potentially suspect testimony or evidence. Not at all.
Absolutely not. No, that would be unethical.
There's no gambling in this casino. That's crazy.
In this casino. So there's much more that reeks about this case, but things really got nasty once Dr. Grigson entered the arena. Quote, during sentencing, the prosecutor called Dr. James P. Grigson, the psychiatrist nicknamed Dr. Death. Though Grigson never examined Stoker, he testified Stoker was a sociopath who would absolutely be violent again. With Stoker's life in the balance, Felty put on only one witness at sentencing, Stoker's mother. She testified briefly about the most superficial aspects of the Stoker family. Felty, who works as a supervisor at Home Depot, defended his work. When we went to trial, we were a hell of a lot better prepared than the DA's office, Felty said. So not a lot of winner. He's not necessarily wrong because the DA's just lying and bribing somebody, but also when your lawyer gets disbarred for felonies and winds up working at a Home Depot, that's not a great sign in terms of the quality of representation you received.
Yeah, the look at my lawyer dog meme.
Look at my lawyer dog, I'm getting executed.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. That is just such beautiful shade in that article too. It's just noting that he's working at Home Depot now. Almost kind of unnecessary, except for the point they're trying to make here. But
it's good color.
It is good color. Now, unfortunately, unlike Adams's story, this story does not end with an 11th hour stay of execution and eventual exoneration. Stoker was executed in 1997 during George W. Bush's governorship, when he pushed Texas to execute inmates at a rate not before seen in modern times. Even within the ranks of Bush appointees, though, the Stoker case was looked at as egregious. Thomas Moss had been appointed by the governor to the Board of Pardons and Paroles, and he voted to give Stoker clemency. That he only did this twice in his entire career, and once was with Stoker, because he was like, yeah, this is just too messy a case. This is, a lot kept coming out. The local police chief eventually testified that no, the Crime Stoppers group wasn't real. We founded it expressly for this purpose, basically. A DA's investigator made the payment. And as this stuff came to light, eventually, the local sheriff testified that there was no direct tie between Stoker and the crime he'd been executed for committing. Now, had Stoker been put under life imprisonment, had his execution basically commuted, right? But given life imprisonment at this point, he likely would have lived long enough to get retried, right? That probably would have happened eventually because there was just enough, good evidence on his side of things for this. But Dr. Grigson helped to ensure that this could not happen, right? By testifying he would definitely kill again. One juror in the Stoker case later said, "You couldn't help but listen to what he was saying. He's a doctor. He had a lot of influence on what we decided." And several jurors later said, "Yeah, if I'd known these other facts about the case, I wouldn't have voted for the death penalty."
Man, thanks for tuning in, Sunshine Meadows. The weirdest one. Usually I'm playing music and talking, but tonight I'm just letting a fucking podcast rip. And muting myself. But yeah, you're the man. I appreciate you. And I'm gonna go back to the weird. To the weird, dude. The fucking best, the fucking legend, Sunshine Meadows, goddamn.
Grigson said he needed to be. And we can say fairly confidently that this was an innocent man who Dr. Grigson helped put to death here.
Yeah.
Throughout the Bush years and the bloodiest period for Texas's death row, Dr. Grigson was prolific and influential, even in cases where he personally did not testify. That Death Penalty Information Center piece discusses another psychiatrist, Dr. E. Clay Griffith, who often testified along the same lines as Dr. Grigson and had clearly built his profession in the other man's image. Like Grigson, he used a 1 to 10 scale for judging defendants and regularly went above 10 in order to make his point, as he did when reviewing the 1984 case of David Wayne Spence. Now, Spence, again, was not tied to the triple homicide that he was accused of committing via any evidence, just the testimony of 7 informants, all of whom had good reason to lie about what had happened. Several of these people later confessed to being fed information by investigators and being shown crime scene and autopsy photos, as well as being bribed behind bars with privileges and leniency. Like Stoker, Spence was executed in 1987 or 1997. The issues we've discussed in all these cases have been proven via subsequent study to be rampant within Texas's criminal justice system, particularly death row cases. An investigation of the 131 executions during George W. Bush's time as governor showed that in at least 29 cases, the prosecution had presented testimony from a psychiatrist, often Dr. Grigson, that the defendant would commit future violence. In most of these cases, the psychiatrist had not seen or examined the defendant. Beyond the issues most relevant to Grigson, in 43 of those cases, the defendant was represented at trial by an attorney who was later disbarred or suspended. Again, I want to really go into that. 131 executions. Of those, in 43 of the cases, the defendant's defense attorney was later disbarred or suspended.
That's insane.
Yeah.
He not only destroyed people's lives and got them killed, but then he also destroyed defense attorneys' careers in the process.
I think the point, this is more a broader point about the fact that most of the people on death row did not benefit from a vigorous defense. You were entitled constitutionally one, and they clearly didn't get it, right?
I completely misunderstood that.
No,
that makes a lot more sense. That just you're dealing with a very poor level of representation,
right?
Where it is clearly falling underneath the bar time and time again at a very large scale.
And part of the problem is that because in so many of these cases, at least 29, Dr. Grigson and others are testifying, you don't have these kind of checked out defense attorneys don't have the wherewithal and often don't have the funding to properly counter the expert that the prosecution has brought up, right? They also found, this is getting into another set of pseudoscience, but I think it's worth bringing up, in 23 or more, at least, of these 131 cases, the prosecution's case relied on the visual comparison of hairs, which is not real science and has now largely been banned as being wildly ineffective. One study of 62 convictions that were later cleared by DNA evidence found that in at least 18 of those cases, prosecutors had used hair analysis to get the initial conviction.
Wow.
And this brings me to an important point, which is that while Dr. Grigson is the most colorful of these experts testifying in favor of the death penalty during this golden age of executing people in Texas, he was not the only or the most obviously fraudulent one. In their review of the role fake forensic experts play in these cases, the Death Penalty Information Center also cited the case of Charles Lynch. Now, this is an expert hair analysis guy, right? And his expert hair comparison analysis was used in the cases of 2 people who were executed under Bush. So he helped with 2 executions as a result of matching hairs. And this is not a DNA match. I really need to emphasize that. He's looking at hairs and saying, oh, yeah, these hairs come from that guy, right? Like, that's what he's literally doing.
So I just have to bring up this one bit that seems somewhat relevant to how much of a shit show Texas court systems and criminal law has been for some time. It wasn't until the past like 5 years or so, I'm trying to remember the exact year, but very recently, that hypnosis as a tool for testimony and in criminal investigations was banned.
So many people got convicted with that as a factor.
Yes. Someone allowed hypnotists to come in and then do hypnosis as if it were a legitimate, repeatable scientific approach for acquiring legitimate testimony or uncovering forgotten memories or whatever that is being used for. So yeah, I mean, that was recently. That was in this century, not last century.
No, it took a shocking amount of time for us to be like, no, we shouldn't be doing this.
I mean, when did the FBI stop doing that fucking gene pattern thing? Where like that FBI fucking shit.
As we've talked about it, forensic science is rife with bastardy. But I want to talk about Charles Lynch a little more. I want to read another quote from that Death Penalty Information Center piece because it's so funny. Again, this guy's hair analysis is used in the case to execute 2 people. The Dallas Morning News reported that Lynch had been committed in 1994 to a psychiatric ward due to concerns about his depression and drinking. Lynch was considered a danger to himself and others, but he was temporarily released to provide incriminating hair analysis testimony against Kenneth McDuff, who was executed in 1998. The prosecution did not disclose Lynch's status to the defense, even though Lynch's residence in the psychiatric ward might have been used to challenge his credibility.
It's incredible.
I don't want to... I got people who, wind up in a psychiatric ward. That doesn't mean they can never do a serious job again. But if you probably shouldn't be releasing someone from a ward to testify and then putting them back in because they're a danger to themselves and others, but they can definitely testify this guy needs to fry, right? That seems like a stretch.
Listen, you got to do what you got to do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah, get this guy out. We can't let this guy have his own like fucking butter knife, but let him tell this jury that a man needs to die. Like, holy shit.
Insane.
That's nuts.
That's
like,
wild.
Just coming across that story like, wow, it really was the wild ass West for a while, huh? You could get away with anything.
Boy, howdy.
Kind of still can.
Kind of still can, yeah. Now, another of Dr. Grigson's colleagues was Dr. Ralph Erdman, who testified in numerous capital cases until 1994, when he pled no contest to 7 felonies over falsifying evidence and fucking up autopsies. He had claimed to have examined organs in decedents that had been removed in surgery before their deaths, for one thing, right? Like in his autopsy reports, he's like writing about the appendixes of people who had no appendix when they died. Despite claiming to be a scientist, providing his unbiased opinion no matter who hired him, a special investigator appointed to examine Erdman found if the prosecution theory was that death was caused by a Martian death ray, then that was what Dr. Erdman reported, right?
Yeah, okay.
Which is, you're talking here about the same thing we're seeing with Dr. Grigson, right? This is a guy who's not doing science. He's coming in and he's saying like, yeah, based on my expertise, whatever the prosecution says is true, right? Now, because Erdman is working in autopsies, he gets caught. But there's nothing to catch Dr. Grigson on, really, right? Because psychiatry is largely like, yeah, does the psychiatrist think this person has something? There's more rigor built that's supposed to be built into the system. But when it comes to the way these court cases are working, it's really just this guy saying, yeah, I'm a doctor, and I say this is what's going on.
It's kind of like the medical equivalent of a mob lawyer. They're playing this role that is predefined for them, and they know what they're supposed to do, and they just go along with whatever the request is, whatever the need is. They'll say, yeah, sure, go for it. I mean, in the case of Grigson, it seems like, yeah, he may have claimed there were cases which he was not eager to do so, but I don't know, maybe he just knew how to pick a winner.
Maybe he knew how to pick a winner. And also when he says a third of the cases I didn't take because I didn't think, the person, we don't know. There's no evidence of that.
Sure.
we're just trusting this guy, you know?
Right.
And I don't trust him. Now, Dr. Erdman did have to surrender his medical license. Dr. Grigson never did. And we're going to talk about what else happens with Dr. Grigson. But first, let's have our second ad break.
Okay.
We're back. So, over the years, when he was pushed on this, he would repeatedly say, hey, I didn't always testify for the prosecution, right? And sometimes I just wouldn't take cases. And we can't back up the latter, but we can back up the amount of times that Dr. Grigson testified for the prosecution versus the defense. During his career, he testified in 166 capital, death penalty cases in Texas. And in 9 of those times, he testified for the defense. So I think it's fair to say basically always a prosecution witness. And by the way, we'll talk later about what some of those other 9 times would have been, because it's not like he just really thought the defense was right in that situation. So we'll get to that. During the busiest period of his career in the 1980s, he was making $150,000 a year with this business, which was equivalent to someone making somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000 a year today, right?
Wow.
He is making fucking bank in the 80s. That 1990 Vanity Fair piece finds him at close to the peak of his career and his sense of impunity over what he was allowed to do. In thousands of words of recorded conversations, he refers to his colleagues in psychiatry as liberal fools and seems to take a great degree of joy and righteous pleasure in getting people executed. His stated goal to the journalist in that article is that he wants to execute 3 people in 3 days, basically, something like that, and break his personal record for most death penalty convictions scored in a short window of time. One of these cases was the case of Gayland Bradford, who definitely shot and killed a security guard during a robbery. This is recorded on video. There's not doubt about whether or not he committed a murder. But once he was in bars, the jail tested his IQ and found it to be 68. The defense psychologist who examined him said it was 75. Either of those, and again, I have my issues with IQ, but this isn't the place to really bring it up. The point is that based on the way the system works, either of those findings could be low enough to count as diminished capacity and spare him the death penalty, right? Both of those are potentially low enough to do so.
For sure.
So during a dinner after winning his first 2 cases, but before the Bradford case, this is the night before he testifies in this guy's case, Dr. Grigson, while hanging out with Rosenbaum, that journalist, gets hammered. He has 4 martinis in an hour, celebrating that he's gotten 2 people killed, and then he winds up hungover in court the next morning. And he kind of fucks up his testimony in the Bradford case a little, because he doesn't just say Bradford is a sociopath, but he also insists he's of normal intelligence. I can tell. He wasn't being asked this, but he's like, I know he's of normal intelligence. And I'll guarantee you he's killed more than once. We just didn't catch him, right?
Wow.
And then he tells the jury, based on nothing, literally nothing, Gayland Bradford is one of the most dangerous killers I've ever examined or come into contact with, right? And again, there's not any evidence of this, and he certainly did not do anything that would allow him to determine whether or not this guy was competent to stand trial. He just does not do that work. And in this one instance, the defense attorney calls him out on it. And questions like, well, based on what aspects of Dr. Bradford's personality, since you have not talked to him, have you concluded all of this? That he killed someone before and is hiding it? And Dr. Grigson, ultimately the only specific thing he cites is that the guy has a weird haircut with a lightning bolt in it. And the defense attorney, first off, holy shit. The defense attorney, Paul Broccoli, responds, pretty good reason to kill him, right? And there's this silence in the courtroom. I'm going to quote from that Vanity Fair piece. The doctor himself was speechless for a moment, something I'd never seen before. Then lamely, plaintively, he volunteered, well, I'd never seen a haircut like that.
And
Great medical science.
Did you say the defense attorney's name was Paul Broccoli?
Yeah, Brauchle.
Okay.
I don't know how else it would be pronounced.
Okay, if I had a different spelling in my head, it's still really funny to think.
Broccoli, maybe? I don't know. I'm calling it broccoli.
Go broccoli.
Yeah, I'm going with broccoli.
For the justification to be, this guy looks fucking weird. I don't like him.
Look at his fucked up hair. Yeah, he's definitely criminally insane.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the bad news is, again, this guy still gets convicted. James Grigson in no way pays for his crimes. The best I can say is that his career does take a hit in the late 1990s, in part as a result of the fallout from the Adams case, and in part out of the fact that he has now been drummed out of every professional organization in his field. Now, another reason why he stops testifying as often is that some of the savvier Texas defense attorneys develop a strategy for mitigating the harm he could cause. Per an article by Mike Tolson for the Houston Chronicle, defense attorneys, fearful of the effect of Grigson's testimony, began to call him and discuss their clients, with the result being that Grigson could not be hired by the state in those cases. I love this shit. Like, well, look, if this guy's talked about this case before being brought on, he can't testify, so let's just call him and talk about it, and then we know he's fucked. It's very funny stuff. Grigson eventually figures out what's going on, and he gets angry because this is costing him money. So several defense attorneys agree to hey, what if we just pay you as a consultant as soon as we think you have a case you might get involved in? And that way you don't have to do anything. You're not going to actually testify. You're not going to do any work for the defense usually.
Oh
but once we're hiring you, the prosecution can't hire you, right? And he's okay with this because he's still getting paid.
Wow.
This snowballs into prosecutors adopting a similar tactic out of fear that he might show up and help the defense. So he starts getting hired to not work as long as one side can lock him down first. He spends kind of the latter chunk of his career doing this, getting paid to not do his job. And, eventually this practice dies out during the 2000s, particularly the practice of bringing in forensic psychiatrists like Dr. Grigson declines in popularity, the kind of late 90s, early 2000s. And there's several reasons for this, but a big one is the constant professional animus that Grigson and others who followed his example started to get, right? This has just kind of been poisoned as a field. Now, another reason that's less optimistic for why this dies out is that prosecutors realize we don't need to spend money on these guys. Texas juries love killing people, right? You don't actually need this guy to testify to convince them that someone needs to die, right?
Depressing.
You can usually just kind of talk them into it, which is less optimistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's less fun. So in 2003, Dr. James Grigson, a lifetime chain smoker, was diagnosed with lung cancer. In one of his last interviews, he told a reporter he had zero regrets about his life or career. He insisted he had just been there as a medical professional, separating the truly ill from the fakers who needed to be locked up and executed. By the end of his career, he was just working in civil law, but after his death in 2004, a number of experts came out to state that his impact on the legal system had been far-reaching. Cynthia Orr, president of the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, told the Chronicle he had a tremendous impact on Texas death penalty litigation. He really provided ammunition to the state to try and establish one's future dangerousness when ordinarily it would have been pretty tough to do. He was willing to go further than anyone else. Yeah.
So horrible.
Yeah.
And he ended up just getting to chill.
Yep.
And get paid to not work.
Get paid to not work. Nice retirement.
Hate to say it, kind of a dude's rock moment, but
yeah, it is the dream, right?
He got to die of lung cancer, so that's,
He does die of lung cancer on June 3rd of 2004 after what his family described as 72 great years.
All right.
Yeah, alas. Now, the nature of the death penalty and the time involved in clearing such cases meant that a lot of people that he had helped to put there remained on death row after his death. And in fact, the most recent case I can find of someone he put there, having, basically winding up in the news is in 2016, Jeffrey Wood, age 43, was scheduled. He was supposed to be executed in 2016 over a 1996 robbery in which a man was murdered. Grigson had testified against him and stated that Wood would be violent in the future, and he obviously did not examine Wood. Now, Wood had never actually murdered in the first place. He didn't fire the gun in the 1996 robbery that he was being executed for, right? But obviously accomplices, he was driving the car, can be convicted of murder. But still, the fact that he's saying he'll definitely kill again, well, he never killed in the first place, right? Not really. So Wood was supposed to be executed in 2016. The actual gunman was executed in 2002. But Wood's case, his execution, was stayed by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals because of Dr. Grigson, right? Because he had been part of getting the guy on death row. And the fact that he has been so burned, convinced the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in 2016, yeah, we probably shouldn't execute this guy, right? So the court ruled 7-2 to stay the execution. And yeah, that just, this guy's impact outlasted him. But it is kind of at least nice that now he is so he's been so discredited that in 2016, a court voted 7-2 that, like, yeah, we can't execute a guy based on this dude's testimony. So at least he's completely discredited.
And dead.
And dead.
Yeah, and dead. He innovated in the field, rode the wave, and died before it became fully discredited. Sorry to say, but yeah, he's at least dead.
He's at least dead. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just glad to hear that we no longer have legal hypnosis as a form of testimony, and that quacks like this guy are not being taken seriously anymore. So I guess there's a silver lining, like you said.
Yep. Things are good forever now. We figured out how to not do bad stuff with executing people, and there's no longer any problems with death row or capital crimes at all. It's all good now.
Don't need to worry about it, kittens. It's all good.
Don't look into it. Yeah. You got anything to plug at the end here, Steven?
Just follow me on Blue Sky, or I don't post on Twitter anymore, so don't go there.
That's good. Yeah, bad to post on Twitter.
I'm writing for a few different outlets, the Barbed Wire, Texas Observer, just had something in MSNBC. And
hell yeah.
I post all of it on Blue Sky. It's probably the easiest way to follow my shit. So go there, or go read the literary magazine I publish, Protean Magazine. It's got some good shit in it.
Yes, Protean has a lot of good shit in it. Steven, you can also find on It Could Happen Here from time to time, talking about Texas, which continues to be one of the most important subjects in the country. Why is Texas the way it is? What's going on there? It was happening there before it's happening wherever you are. Odds are.
It's been happening.
It's been happening.
Do be happening still. And yeah, if we can figure out what the fuck's going on here, I feel like we could figure out a lot. So working on it.
Well, this has been Behind the Bastards, and you have been listening to a podcast. Shame on you.
Behind the Bastards is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Behind the Bastards is now available on YouTube. New episodes every Wednesday and Friday. Subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/@BehindTheBastards.
This is an iHeart podcast.
Hear that? That's the sound of Cinnamon Toast Crunch telling us it's crunch time as we gear up for another year of cereal training camp. Last year, a dynamic brother duo competed and won the right to make their very own cereal. They named it the Kelsey Mix. This summer, the energy is being brought straight from the end zone to the breakfast aisle with 3 cereal-loving wide receivers: Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jamar Chase. You can find these football stars on limited edition cereal boxes of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Lucky Charms, Honey Nut Cheerios, and Reese's Puff cereal starting in August. And don't miss out on Justin Jefferson's Jetta's Mix, a fruity fusion of frosted lemon Cheerios and Cinnamon Toast Crunch strawberry for a limited time only. Be sure to score them all, where every bite tastes like a touchdown.
Oh, hey everyone. Sorry, I'm just watching this Epstein jail footage. All 11 hours. I'm sorry, 10 hours and 59 minutes. No, sorry, 10 hours and 57 minutes. It's fascinating. It's like those Paranormal Activity films. I think I saw a trash can scoot at hour 7. Tomorrow I'm going to call the jail and tell them it might be haunted. I'm sure they're taking calls. Anyway, here's some news. The Jeffrey Epstein case has been solved. It turns out nothing happened. He killed himself. No connection to anything or anyone. No victims. No crimes. Everyone, move on. Stop looking into it. It's done. 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 But, there's a lesson here. Sometimes a wealthy child sex trafficker with connections to powerful and high-profile individuals, including multiple presidents of the United States, is just a wealthy child sex trafficker with connections to powerful and high-profile individuals, including multiple presidents of the United States. The end. Now let's talk about this jail ghost.
How are you, sir?
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
We should probably talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, okay. Fine. The title says we're going to talk about Epstein some more, so I guess we'll talk about Epstein some more. Can't argue with the title. That's just nature, man. Like ghosts. And to start, we're just going to go over the facts. People love facts, right? And to preface this, I want to note that multiple things can be true. What I mean is that you can accept reality and still believe that there's something suspicious going on. So, for example, concerning his suicide and or murder, there's a lot of conspiracy fodder around it that's pretty bogus. For example, within this example, a lot of people were saying that the broken hyoid bone in Epstein's neck meant that it had to be a homicide. This included pathologist Michael Baden, who was brought in by Epstein's family to watch the autopsy.
So if you're there watching them perform this autopsy, you notice these 3 broken bones, and you believe it would be homicide. So that would mean another person would have gone into his cell, strangled him. Did he have any signs of trying to fight back?
Well, they took fingernail clippings to see if there's anybody else's DNA on it, and that hasn't been released.
So we'd actually later learn that according to the medical examiner, there was nothing found under his fingernails or any sign of a struggle. As for the broken bones, well, that's actually common for suicides by older people. Those bones get brittle and take very little force to break like that. Our bodies are, as you know, terrible meat computers that degrade with time. And that Michael Baden guy, well, he's sort of a media ham. He goes all the way back to the O.J. Simpson trial and has built an entire career around butting into famous cases to boost his true crime TV career. We're going to see a lot of that with the Epstein stuff because, to be frank, most of the evidence here, not the vibes, but the evidence, points to suicide. Mind you, that doesn't mean there weren't people who stood to gain from Epstein's death. But what's often funny about conspiracies is that they can be used to cover up obvious but more boring injustices. Like if you're wondering how this man could have been allowed to kill himself, like how the prison didn't notice, well, have you watched our other episodes on prisons? Much like all prisons in America, the one that housed Jeffrey Epstein was understaffed and poorly managed. In a way, even if he killed himself, you could still say he was killed, if only because the prison gave him more than enough opportunities to do so, even after he'd attempted suicide once before. I don't know, maybe you still think they were told to look the other way or ignore it when he hoarded extra sheets to hang himself. Maybe I'm suspicious of that too, but we're not getting into that because we're just going over the facts. Maybe you're a bit curious about that missing video footage or how the metadata showed that it was modified. I certainly was, but currently the headlines have been a bit more scandalous than the actual facts, and ultimately, you can believe either story. Perhaps they took the raw footage and simply used Adobe Premiere to compile and export it, and maybe change the file type. Maybe it's true that the missing minute is due to a system reset, and the extra couple of missing minutes are bonus missing minutes. Even Wired notes that the missing extra minutes might be due to a footage overlap. Could be nothing, or they cut something out of the footage. The best conspiracies are the ones with this much ambiguity, and the media certainly loves sensationalizing this. Here's a hard-hitting piece about a man who once stayed in the same cell that Epstein stayed in. I'm sure he'll get to the bottom of this.
I've said this from day one. I do not believe it was suicide. I can't talk about what happened to him, but I don't believe it was a suicide because you just couldn't physically do it. It would be almost impossible to do it.
Wait, does he have YouTube subscriber plaques behind him? Yeah, that guy has a YouTube channel where he talks about being in the mob and is an actor who also appears in true crime docs as part of his career. Nothing against him, because I'm pretty sure he could kill me, but he's yet another media ham. Ultimately, I'm not going to convince you either way. Or myself, really. I mean, dang, do we even know that's the footage outside his cell? Here's a picture of his cell from 2019. I don't know. If someone powerful wanted to kill him, I'm guessing they could have. If someone powerful wanted him to be dead, I'm guessing they could have just made it easier for him to do the job himself. But I also personally don't think the circumstances around his death matter all that much. It would certainly be more cinematic if he was assassinated, like something from the hit film The Firm. I'm not saying that ironically. The Firm was the #1 movie in America for 3 weeks in 1993. we used to be a better country. Anyway, it would also be easier if he did have an actual list somewhere. Something we could dramatically reveal, like when Geraldo opened Al Capone's vault and totally found all that stuff inside. But I don't think everything needs to hinge on those two ideas. In fact, the entire suicide v. murder debate feels like a distraction from the larger story, which is that Jeffrey Epstein was definitely a sex trafficker with powerful friends, many of whom you can see with entries and pages of contact information in his little black book that we do have and have had for years, many of whom were probably also his clients. And it's very weird that we haven't arrested anyone for this. That is odd, or rather, I guess it's not odd at all. I mean, some of the people being implicated here include former President Bill Clinton, who is named in the Epstein documents over 100 times. This includes victim testimony claiming that Epstein said that Clinton, quote, likes them young, and that she had dinner on Epstein's island with Clinton. And although I think it's probably important to understand that you don't have to have gone to the island or even be on his plane to be potentially implicated in this, but Clinton would go to that island a couple of times, at least according to another witness. His name is also on the flight logs of Epstein's jet, but not specifically for Epstein's island, even if there isn't any smoking gun here. My betting money is on Bill Clinton being a pedophile and a rapist, allegedly. Just what I think. This is all going to be just what I personally think. But, I mean, here's a picture of him getting a massage from one of Epstein's victims. Seems bad. Anyway, God, who else has been named? Speaking of presidents, there's Prince Andrew. Prince is kind of like a president, a royal president. Much like Clinton, there's a picture of him getting all touchy with one of the victims. There are multiple allegations from multiple witnesses naming his involvement. He ended up settling in court against one of the alleged victims, which seems pretty sketchy. This isn't Britland or even Ingmerica, so I'm not going to spend too much time on him, but he probably has some of the most damning evidence against him. So, I don't know. Who else? Who else? Alan Dershowitz. You might know him from his recent op-ed where he tried to assure everyone that there's nothing to see with the Epstein stuff. Thanks, Alan.
Is the government hiding a client list or anything that the Trump administration could release tonight?
No, there is no client list. There never has been a client list. A client list suggests that Jeffrey Epstein made a list of people to whom he trafficked women.
Oh, yeah, good. Chris Cuomo and Alan Dershowitz are on the case. Gonna root out those creeps, those two. Yeah, Alan was named in a deposition for having raped one of the victims 6 fucking times. Maybe he should, at the very least, shut his gross mouth. He's admitted to flying on Epstein's jet a bunch. At one point, he blamed the allegations on radical feminists who need to condemn Hamas. He's a mess, is my point. If he were a state, he'd be Massachusetts. And his main export is sketchiness. Another op-ed of note written by him was in the 90s, and it was literally called, quote, statutory rape is an outdated concept. But, you know, a lot of bad opinions in the 90s. Maybe he's evolved since.
About 20 years ago, I wrote an article in the Los Angeles Times in which I said the age of consent for sex is way too high. Why shouldn't a 17-and-a-half-year-old girl be able to consent to having loving, consensual, wonderful sex with an 18-year-old boy?
Alan! What are you doing? Oh! Stop talking! It seems kind of sus, okay? It's just a squish sus. Anyway, G's and crackers. Who else? Who the frig else? I said Clinton, Prince Andrew, Dershowitz, obviously, just now. Other people named in the files are Michael Jackson, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson. Covered Clinton already. Prince Andrew. That's it.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
Oh, right. I remember now. Sorry. That clip just jogged my memory, you see. I guess I've been told people are saying that perhaps, also maybe, Donald Trump might be linked to Epstein too. I know, it's kind of a conspiracy theory, but if you just follow me, I think I can explain the connection, okay? So hold on, here we go. All right, we're gonna do, okay, so we got that. Just, yeah, okay. Okay, so we have Trump over here, and Epstein's over here, right? And so Jeffrey Epstein was close friends with Donald Trump. So I guess it's not that complicated.
The video shows them partying like pals. President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein at Mar-a-Lago in a room full of cheerleaders.
Seems kind of... To quote Trump in 2002, quote, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life." End quote. That's a quote from Trump about Epstein. A terrific guy, liking young women. He and Epstein also organized something called a Calendar Girl competition at Mar-a-Lago in the 90s. They brought in 28 women to compete, only to reveal that the only people in the audience were Trump and Epstein. That evening would result in a lawsuit where Trump was accused of pulling a woman into his daughter's bedroom and forcing himself on her. Anyway, just two terrific guys getting into romps. A real Harold and Kumar, you know? There's apparently 100 hours of Epstein talking about his friendship with Donald Trump. Maybe in it he mentioned Maria Farmer, a woman who alerted the FBI with concerns of Trump and Epstein twice in 1996 and 2006. She describes an encounter where Trump was hovering over her and leering at her when Epstein came in and said, "No, she's not for you." They go in the other room and she hears Trump say that he thought she was 16 years old. But that's just a salacious rumor reported to the FBI twice. Of course, we also just saw the video of them scoping chicks together at their filmed Eyes Wide Shut party. I feel like in a different, better reality, that video alone would end a political career on the spot, as would audio of Trump admitting to grabbing women's genitals, or all the times he's been a weird creep to his own daughter, like when he said when she was 25 years old that if she wasn't his daughter, he'd be dating her. Also, that audio of him bragging about walking into beauty pageant dressing rooms.
Standing there with no clue. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that.
That dressing room thing happened with girls as young as 15. And who can forget the time when, as a 46-year-old man, out loud and on camera, he told a small child that he'd be dating her in 10 years.
Thursday night. You're going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years. Can you believe it?
You can hear him say, "I'm going to be dating her in 10 years. Can you believe it?"
In public, on camera. Oh, and there was that time he was found legally liable for sexual abuse. In terms of Epstein, well, Trump flew on his plane at least 7 times. Probably more, considering that they were such good pals. He was at Trump's wedding, but to be fair and balanced, Ghislaine Maxwell was at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. But yeah, here's Trump in the logs. His name comes up 8 times in 2 depositions that we know of. Stories about Trump having sex with young women through Epstein. Here's a court document from a lawsuit claiming that Trump and Epstein both raped a girl when she was 13. That lawsuit was later withdrawn, but the allegations were not. Seems like a pattern here, with multiple people, unrelated to each other, accusing Trump of abuse and rape throughout his life. A history of abusing women and verbally sexualizing young girls. Here he is in Epstein's Black Book of Contacts. And if you're wondering why his name is circled, well, here's journalist Nick Bryant explaining that.
The people that are circled, okay, how the Black Book came to exist was Alfredo Rodriguez stole all of Epstein's numbers, and which is the Black Book.
Who was Alfredo Rodriguez?
He was Epstein's house manager.
Okay.
I got the black book from some people who got it from the FBI.
Holy shit.
But Rodriguez said that the people that were circled were in cahoots with Epstein on the as far as the child abuse.
So the FBI are the ones that did the circles.
No,
Epstein was.
Rodriguez.
Oh, Rodriguez.
Did the circles. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Clinton's name, or rather Clinton's assistant's name, isn't circled. Though, as Bryant points out, Epstein had 25 contact numbers for Clinton. And mind you, this is all speculation with the circling stuff. But one could speculate that, while people like Bill Clinton might have been and almost definitely were clients, that kind of implies that Donald Trump could have been something else. He could have been perhaps working behind the counter, so to speak. Hey, remember how at least one of Epstein's victims was specifically recruited at Mar-a-Lago? If you believe the Epstein story at all, you also have to accept that. It's a fact. Underage girls at Trump's home were recruited by a sex trafficker who was close friends with him. Remember when Trump ran a model management company that allegedly brought in women to work illegally from other countries? I don't know, folks. I guess there's no direct evidence in all of this, but folks, come on. The crowd that's meticulously decoding emails about pizza to the point they go to a DC pizza place with a gun just can't quite wrap their minds around the fact that Jeffrey Epstein ran an underage sex trafficking ring that catered to rich and famous people and was also close friends with Donald Trump, a United States president with an extensive history of bragging about grabbing and harassing women and making inappropriate comments to or about young girls, including his daughter. Multiple allegations of rape, one that he was found liable for, and his good pal, the underage sex trafficker, proceeded to die in jail during Trump's first term in office. And now, years later, Trump has been pleading with everyone to just please stop talking about it. There's no other way to put this. Donald Trump is the guiltiest man who ever lived. Just the sweatiest, most obvious rapist and child molester in the history of the world. He deserves an award for this. His first deserved award. I know that life isn't like a movie, but if this were a movie, he'd be played by Gene Hackman. It is positively beyond parody, like straight out of a South Park episode, that Trump could manage to rally this base that's obsessed with hunting for pedophiles when he is clearly the most guilty pedophile ever.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
It is so very much that hot dog meme. We're all trying to find the me who did this. More hot dog meme than anything has ever been before. Many people are saying this. Many people are saying that he's the most hot dog meme a man has ever been. And for most normal, sensible humans, we've just been watching this with amazement, right? For years, MAGA has been saying, come on, gang, let's go get the pedophiles, when their guy is clearly at the end of that journey.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
Guy, declassify Jeffrey Epstein files? What do you think? And the rest of those, that list.
That last one is extra interesting.
It is extra interesting,
I would like to see that. I think a lot of Americans would like to see that.
Ah, yes, we would like to see that. Fun fact about that clip, they actually cut it off before he says this part.
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
Oh, yeah, a lot of phony stuff in there, he says. My goodness. Hey, Fox, I thought it was like illegal to cut stuff out of interviews or something. It's interesting to note how little Trump actually brought up Epstein in the past. Kind of like he knew it was a bad subject for him, despite his people getting so gassed up about it. He knew it helped him, but only to a point. Because he's the most guilty man ever. Did I mention that? And we all watched this play out. and some of us wondered how he would manage to keep the grift up. It's like a cult leader where at some point he's gonna have to show them some aliens or whip out the Kool-Aid. At some point, Trump was gonna have to put up or shut up. He has spent a decade somehow convincing his base that he's this anti-establishment figure standing up against the elite Democrats who are all the pedophiles and Satanists, while he himself has always been the total embodiment of that thing, this walking guar puppet, a gold bespectacled 80s villain running casinos and hotels, somehow posing as the underdog fighting the good fight. While we were writing this episode, the Wall Street Journal revealed that the Justice Department found a 50th birthday album of Epstein's. It's been reported that it contains personal, raunchy birthday cards from people like Bill Clinton and some former Harvard professors. It also included a letter from Donald Trump, in which he drew a picture of a naked woman and signed it with what I could only describe as like a freestyle poem. The drawing is said to have, quote, small arcs depicting the woman's breasts, which, given the context, makes me think that maybe it's not a drawing of a grown woman. It, of course, doesn't matter, because according to Trump, in response to this story, he's never written a picture in his life. Yes, he said the word written, referring to drawing, and no, he's not correct. Trump has a history of drawing people little pictures. Here are several. He lied about that. Anyway, I guess I'm unfortunately now going to read you that entire poem. Voiceover. There must be more to life than having everything. Donald. Yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey. Nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald. We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey. Yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald. Enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey. As a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Donald. A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. End poem. So yeah, hi. Donald Trump is a pedophile? That was the actual message by Donald Trump, the current president, who's a pedophile, allegedly. Just my opinion. Please don't cancel me like Colbert. The MAGA media mega defensiveness seems to be that it's fake, because if it's real, what else? What else could they say to the obvious pedophile message to the other pedophile? Obviously, Trump's claim that he doesn't write pictures fell apart immediately, and not only because the word he was looking for was draw, but the other claim from people like his fake son, J.D. Vance, who interestingly met with Rupert Murdoch 2 days before this story broke. I wonder what that's about. I wonder if he's like, well, you can publish the story, and then if something happens to Trump, it's okay, I got your back, man, I'll be the president, and it'll be fine. Whatever, I don't know what they talked about, doesn't matter. But their point now is that this is fake, because Trump doesn't talk like that. First of all, this was more than 20 years ago, so we're not even talking about modern day Trump. But also, this wasn't a transcript of things that Donald Trump actually said out loud. It's not a tweet, it's not some rant about windmills from his rallies, it's a secret little pedophile poem play that he wrote to his best friend 20 years ago. It's not supposed to sound like him. Also, the defense is that the President of the United States, who's constantly playing 5D chess, doesn't know the word enigma. I kind of understand this defense. The man's a fucking idiot. But they're not supposed to think that. Also, he's used the word enigma many times. Because that poem, my friends, is the writing of a pedophile. The poem of the guiltiest man who ever existed. Which again, we already knew about, we've known forever, and somehow, through some kind of cosmic error, he got away with this deep state grift for years. Even when he became the fucking president of the United States, he was somehow able to maintain this idea that there's a larger shadow government pulling the strings. Corruption and abuse of power is a bipartisan affair. But somehow, he managed to scream, everyone's corrupt and friends with Epstein but me! And people believed him. But now we're seeing, hopefully, maybe, his supporters realize that perhaps it's past time that he exposed the shadow elite. And so after the break, we're going to look at this moment. We're going to look at how the world's guiltiest man is handling the increasing calls for the Epstein client list. A list that, if it exists, he himself absolutely would be on. Allegedly. Be right back. If you were born after 1970, and these days, who wasn't? Anyone over 55? Oh. So lots of people, okay. Then it's likely that your first razor was a multi-blade razor. It's been the standard ever since old Ronnie Riggs was shaving his notably prominent unibrow. But multiple razors can be rough on skin and it's wasteful. Back in the old days, nobody cared about skin health or the environment. But in 2025, we do care about skin health. And that's why when I need to shave for this show or a bat mitzvah or something, I use razors from Henson Shaving. These smooth exteriored folks are challenging the status quo of shaving. Not through gimmicks like subscriptions or moisturizing strips, but through high-quality razors that treat your skin like polished Italian leather. Even 80s villain Ronald the Hedgehog Reagan could get behind that. I love my Henson razors because they're great for my skin and they're made of aluminum with no plastic in the razor or the packaging. You can treat your face nice and care about the environment too, unlike some of all of the presidents. So say, get out of here to subscriptions and get in here to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/SMN to pick the razor for you and use code SMN to get a pack of 100 blades free with your razor. That's enough for 2 years of shaving, depending on how often you shave. Just make sure to add it to your cart. That's a free pack of 100 blades when you head to HENSONSHAVING.com/SMN and use code SMN. You thought I was going to do a jingle, but I didn't. You're welcome, or I'm sorry. That's that.
You know that sinking feeling when you say something you can't take back, and now a certain puppet you work with thinks you like him? Like him? No, that's not something I want to spend my weekend thinking about. So, I am here to tell you about a sinking feeling that actually feels good, and that is the experience of sinking down in my new Lisa mattress. From the very first night, I knew I'd made a wise choice, as my Lisa mattress provides me with serious comfort and full body support. You will sink right into one of their beautifully crafted luxury mattresses, and you won't even be worrying about how a certain character, let's call him, I don't know, Snailbow, has been blowing up your DMs ever since you jokingly refer to his neck as hella taut. Ooh, gross. But when it comes to Lisa mattresses, you don't have to just take my word for it. They have been awarded Best Hybrid Mattress by New York Times' Wirecutter, and they are exclusively featured by West Elm as their go-to mattress partner. So go to lisa.com for 25% off mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with promo code MORENEWS, exclusive to our audience, as part of their Labor Day early access sale. That is LEESA.com, promo code MORENEWS for 25% off mattresses, plus an extra $50 off. Yes, it's a good deal. And honestly, these mattresses, they're great. So be sure to enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent ya. Lisa.com, promo code MORENEWS. I just need to tell him that I think of him as more like a friend, you know? As like a work puppet friend.
Oh man, it's a hot one. And now that my landlord has taken out the air conditioner because of defunding, I'm down to only having water to make me feel revitalized. Thankfully, my tushy bidet has turned the sweltering summer season into an oasis of lower body refreshment. It was a cinch to install and leaves me feeling clean in a way that paper could never. My nethers feel just like the ocean under the moon with instant warm water and Tushy's built-in air dryer. The entire bathrooming process is now completely hands-free so that I can dedicate these little babies to more important matters, like Googling all my favorite song lyrics and then scrolling through the ads and getting a bunch of pop-ups and being like, no, lyrics. Just do the lyrics. So come on, my muñequita, and keep your swampiest body parts fresh and cool. For a limited time, our audience gets 10% off their first bidet order when you use code SMN at checkout. That's 10% off your first bidet order at HelloTushy.com with promo code SMN. Tushy is my reason for reason, the step in my groove. What a bop that song was. What a bop.
It's true that some things change as we get older. But if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing with insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. And with MIDI Health, you can get help and stop pushing through it alone. The experts at MIDI understand that all these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around menopause, and MIDI can help you feel more like yourself again. Many healthcare providers aren't trained to treat or even recognize menopause symptoms. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts. They're dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions for dozens of hormonal symptoms, not just hot flashes. Most importantly, they're covered by insurance. 91% of MIDI patients get relief from symptoms within just 2 months. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
Hey, hi, we're back. We were just cracking the mysterious case of Jeffrey Epstein, the wealthy sex trafficker and pedophile with absolutely no clients or accomplices that anyone can find. Certainly not the current president, who happened to be close and personal friends with him, sharing wonderful secrets. We've tracked the previous allegations and connections using our intense powers of looking. And it's time to talk about what's happening now. Specifically, when Attorney General Pam Bondi said this about the Epstein client list only a few months ago.
And one of the things that you alluded to, and this is something Donald Trump has talked about, the DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
Boy, dude, bruh. What did they think was gonna happen after this point? Were they just hoping that everyone would forget, that some other disaster would come up and distract everyone? I mean, yeah, that's not a bad bet, but it's clear that people did not forget the way they had hoped. Because after Pam Bondi claimed that she had the client list, quote, on my desk, in addition to tens of thousands of videos some poor souls were reviewing, it seems that this list has mysteriously flown out her window. Perhaps a gentle breeze sent it into her shredder, which then blew the shreds into an incinerator. Basically, just months after that claim, the DOJ and FBI have now said that there was no client list, and Epstein did indeed kill himself. After years of Trump's base gassing themselves up about this, they are just asking everyone to move on, please. This has, understandably, caused a large portion of his supporters to revolt. Even Mike Pence is scoring off of him. And I gotta be honest with you, until this moment, I maybe would have believed the DOJ. What I mean is that, of course, Epstein had clients and accomplices, but I would be willing to believe that he didn't keep any physical list of them. I would even believe that he had killed himself, simply because he knew how much shit he was in, and what prison would be like for the world's most famous pedophile. To me, it seemed like Trump had been tolerating the Epstein stuff simply to keep his conspiracy base happy. He appointed these dudes who were specifically gassing everyone up about this. But again, he actually didn't bring it up a lot himself. I wonder why, but he did allude to its importance in relation to the Clintons, and continuously say that he'd release the information. Maybe not all of it. He'd built an elaborate world of deep state pedophiles that he rode like a disgusting wave into a second term. It's the same with the JFK files. MAGA built that up so much, and when they were finally released, they didn't really have some bombshell revelation in them. It's like that Geraldo thing I mentioned before with Al Capone's vault. Except imagine there was nothing in that vault. That would certainly make Geraldo look like the biggest dickhead in the world, right? Thank goodness there was definitely something in that vault. I assume. I've never watched this special. Anyway, my point is that while I certainly wouldn't dismiss the Epstein case as being closed, and do think that Trump probably was definitely involved, I could have, at one point, believed that there was no hard evidence of that. And now, well...
President Trump, would you consider appointing a special counsel to investigate the Jeffrey Epstein investigation?
I have nothing to do with it.
Oh man, okay. He did it all. Like, now I'm wondering if there is a P-tape. It's all back on the table. Maybe he killed Kennedy. Was his father the Zodiac killer? Holy moly. He is guilty of, like, everything. The most guilty man who ever lived in the history of the universe. No one is more guilty than him. But, let's hear his side of it.
You know, these files were made up by Comey. They were made up by Obama. They were made up by the Biden, we went through years of that with the Russia hoax.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains it all then. Fun fact about that clip. That was an answer to the question, did Pam Bondi tell you that your name appears in the Epstein files? And his response to that was, well, the files were made up by Comey and Obama and the Biden administration. So his answer was yes, he was told that he was in the files. In fact, it just came out as we were filming this, like seriously, literally 10 minutes ago, that Trump was indeed told that he was in the files back in May. But also, what is he even trying to mean here? Is he saying that the Epstein client list, which would certainly name Bill Clinton, was made up by Obama, Comey, and Biden? That's the new story. We went from the Epstein files being on Pam Bondi's desk to not existing, to existing, absolutely mentioning Trump, but being fake. So he's very guilty then, right? And now he's just tossing out names he knows his base hates, isn't he? I'm surprised he didn't mention Benghazi yet. He's just throwing glitter in the air and running away. He is so freaking guilty. I mean, I knew he was before. We all knew. But now I think that maybe there's actually evidence of it, or was at some point. And Trump has been going through all the stages of grief over this. You just saw bargaining. But there was also anger when Trump posted several times about how his supporters were all dummies and weaklings and fake fans forever believing the Epstein stuff. He's literally saying to his supporters that they were stupid for believing the things he told them to believe. There's also denial, tons of that. House Republicans literally blocked legislation that would have released the Epstein files to the public. They are now taking an early recess to completely avoid the issue because they are cowards. Trump has begun to actually call his wormy little pundits and tell them directly to stop talking about it. You know, like the guiltiest man in the world would do.
I think that right now it seems pretty clear we're not going to get more information out of the government. They have closed the case.
Honestly, I'm done talking about Epstein for the time being. I'm going to trust my friends in the administration. I'm going to trust my friends in the government to do what needs to be done, solve it, balls in their hands. I've said plenty this last weekend.
Yes, balls in their hands indeed. Dinesh was particularly interesting in that he recognizes that there was clearly something that happened, but still has decided that we should all just move on. The attitude, if you notice, is that these totally punk rock, underdog, anti-elite, anti-big government conservatives are suddenly deciding to trust the government and their precious billionaire about all of this. It's in their balls now. Let's talk about something else, please. Now, to their credit, a lot of MAGA people aren't going along with this. There is a divide, albeit a shrinking one, that a lot of conservatives are struggling to fix. And probably the funniest example of this was on News Nation, which I guess is a cable channel, when Bill O'Reilly desperately tried to yes and Trump's lie about Biden and Obama being in on it.
The Biden administration had exactly the same thing the Trump administration has on Epstein. Exactly.
Right.
Because Epstein was convicted during the Biden administration. Not one time did Hakeem Jeffrey call for any exposition of what the Biden Justice Department knew. Not once. So this guy's a top phony, okay? He's a political player. He doesn't care about the truth. He doesn't care about the people.
Bill,
this is what
hold on.
he
I
does.
just got. Hold on, Bill. Hold on. You said Epstein was convicted during the Biden administration. Epstein committed suicide during the Trump administration.
Yeah, so?
Oh, Bill, what a gift you are. And he just keeps going with this. Like his brain literally just refuses to accept that Biden and Merrick Garland were not involved in Epstein's arrest. And it was, in fact, the Trump administration that had the access and, you know, plenty of time to screw around with the case.
Bill, I think this is important. Bill, I think this is important. He was arrested in 2019, and he committed suicide in 2019. He died August 10th of 2019. So the Biden administration was not involved in a conviction or a trial of him. They were in of his madam, of Ghislaine Maxwell.
Okay. And that's a good point of clarification. But he was arrested and indicted under Merrick Garland.
No, under Trump.
Who had all of the information.
Epstein was arrested, indicted, and committed suicide under Trump in 2019. Trump was president. Merrick Garland was not the attorney general.
Okay.
Bill! I love you, Bill. Let's get married. They're trying so hard. They want so badly for MAGA to forget about all of this. And so now everyone around Trump is scrambling to protect him and his mess he promised everybody. Trump is now ordering the release of grand jury testimony around the case to give the appearance of transparency. Emphasis on appearance, because a judge has already denied that release due to a binding precedent by the 11th U.S. Circuit of Appeals. Of course, Trump famously does not care what judges say, but also, according to the judge, the government, quote, has effectively conceded that the court's hands are tied. Oh no, but Mr. Trump, you tried so hard! The DOJ is also saying they will meet with Ghislaine Maxwell again, and some Republicans in Congress are asking for her to speak publicly as well. Weird. I wonder why the guy who pardons his supporters and insurrectionists and sycophants and who, after Maxwell was arrested, wished her well in public twice, would be okay with his longtime friend and best friend's madam having an opportunity to speak again. That's so weird. And yet, they still won't release the Epstein files, will they? Trump, along with some of his propagandists, has already started using the term credible files. He's okay with releasing the credible files, you see, the ones not about me, you see. And wouldn't you know it, we're now hearing that the FBI has been instructed to flag any occurrence of Trump's name in them. So I'm guessing they need time to, you know, change them. I mean, do you believe a thing this administration releases now? He's trying to blame it on Biden and Obama and Comey. Comey! But what's kind of amazing and depressing is that for a lot of Republicans, this is going to work. It's not the first time we've seen such obvious lies become normalized and forgotten. It kind of reminds me of his tax return stuff. Do you even remember that? The stakes weren't as high as Epstein, but Trump went from constantly promising to release his tax returns all the way to fighting in court to not have his returns released. That is just so obviously guilty behavior. It's like saying, yeah, of course you can check my trunk, officer, and then lighting your car on fire, which works, by the way. Cops cannot legally search your car if it's on fire. Remember that. I don't know, it's just that for years, people love to say that this time Trump's base is finally going to turn on him, that this will be the final straw. But it's really hard to believe that when he's been this way the entire time. Since the very start, he's been so clearly a grifter and a liar. And yet there's still this chunk of people that seems unable to realize that very, very, very obvious thing about him. He's actually bewitched people. It's infuriating and a little frightening. For most sensible people, we see it. He's this sweaty used car salesman type with a bad fake tan and a long history of failure and lies. And not good lies. Every credible scandal involving him has been deflected simply by saying fake news like a toddler or calling it a Democrat hoax. Everything is just one big hoax and conspiracy against him specifically. Stuff that existed decades before he was even running for president. And his base just accepted that lazy bullshit with total faith. Either because they like who he angers and hurts, or have completely deluded themselves. Maybe probably both. I don't know. So it really seems like this will just be rolled into the Russia hoax and Comey stuff and all the other flimsy excuses he's given from the start. Here he is on Just the News, which I guess is a cable channel, doing just that.
I think they could look at all of it. It's all the same scam. They could look at this Jeffrey Epstein hoax also, because that's the same stuff. That's all put out by Democrats.
Yeah.
And, some of the naive Republicans fall right into line like they always do. They just don't have the sustainability. They don't have they don't have that stick to it like glue.
No, they definitely set the Republicans up.
In the case of Epstein, they've already looked at it, and they are looking at it, and I think all they have to do is put out anything credible. But, that was run by the Biden administration for 4 years. I can imagine what they put into files, just like they did with the others. I mean, the Steele dossier was a total fake.
Right.
It took 2 years to figure that out for the people. And all of the things that you mentioned were fake.
Yep.
So I would imagine if they were run by Chris Wray and they were run by Comey, and because it was actually even before that administration, they've been running these files. And so much of the things that we found were fake with me.
Huh. First of all, very funny for him to claim that Republicans don't absolutely fall in line like these servile little worms they are. Also, note how he says fake with me, because he's absolutely in the Epstein files. But now he's just rolling it all into this new fantasy while the news anchor nods along. Yeah, the Democrats really set Republicans up. It's all part of that big hoax that existed long before his first term, apparently. Just decades of this Epstein hoax that he didn't do anything about when he was president, in these files that are selectively true and fake depending on who is named in them. It's like the MCU. We're in phase 5 or 6 or whatever, doing the multiverse meta plot stuff. Just lies upon lies folding over each other, contradicting each other, while his underlings desperately try to weave it all together to make sense. Rewrite history, or more fitting, it's like a mystery box show. There's this constant promise Trump has been making that there's some higher and darker power at work. But at a certain point, that power has to be exposed. At some point, the box needs to be opened. And it gets harder and harder for him to claim that there's this shadow government the longer he's in power. And not just for him. Here's Tulsi Gabbard giving a speech at some turning point in USA nonsense, bragging about how she's fighting against the deep state.
I can attest personally that in my work as the Director of National Intelligence, the deep state is fighting us every step of the way.
Hey, Tulsi, what the fuck are you talking about? As you literally say in that sentence, you are the Director of National Intelligence. Who is this deep state you're fighting? Name them. What are they doing exactly to you? You can't keep blaming the elites and shadow government when you are literally in charge of the CIA. The Republicans have complete control of our government. How many times can Trump blame some mysterious higher power before people realize that there isn't one? They keep talking about fraud and hoaxes and crimes by Democrats, and yet, where are the convictions? You have your own secret police now. Surely, if there is a big conspiracy of Satanist Democrats, you could expose them, but you haven't, because there isn't any. They're trying to distract people by talking about how Barack Hussein Obama invented the Russia hoax. They're trying to focus on complaining about the names of sports teams. They're trying to arrest Adam Schiff for the thing Trump cares so much about, alleged mortgage fraud. They're trying to say that we're going to arrest Obama for treason any day now. Any day now. Instead of this other stuff. And honestly, they probably will still get away with this. Again, we all really want to think about this as a house of cards that will eventually topple. But I'm not so sure. Considering all the lazy lies he's gotten away with already, it's hard to think that anything will do it. Because if Trump's rise has taught us anything, it's that America is a country of conspiracy theorists. We love them. The internet, no doubt, made our love even stronger, but we've always been into it. UFOs, moon landing, JFK, X-Files stuff. This fundamental belief that there's some larger and more complex system behind the world around us. It really speaks to people. It makes our lives feel less chaotic. I don't mean to sound all Ricky Gervais, but I imagine it's similar to religion for people. And Trump has directly tapped into the most ravenous conspiracy freaks of them all, and in fact, his political success depends on them.
Well, let's talk about 2024, Harris versus Trump margin, right? QAnon believers. Look at this margin that Donald Trump built up among QAnon believers. He won them by 61 points, or it was at least leading amongst them by 61 points back during the 2024 campaign. Look at those who reject or doubt QAnon. Harris was actually leading amongst them by 16 points during the 2024 campaign. Donald Trump would not have won the presidency in 2024 if it were not for the backing of QAnon believers. That is a bottom line. That is a true statement. That is in the polling data.
See, here's the thing about conspiracy people. They don't really care about policy. They don't care about tariffs or immigration or healthcare. When you think lizard people exist, the nuance of the economy doesn't really thrill you. If you were to ask the most hardcore Dale Gribble type why they would vote for Trump, they're just going to say that it's because he'll expose the deep state. And sure, it's a spectrum. Not everyone is a hardcore conspiracy weirdo, and I bet there are people who are concerned about the deep state and policy. But for so many MAGA supporters, it appears to be extremely important to their identity that there is, in fact, a secret cabal of pedophile Democrats, and only Democrats, mind you. Because if there isn't, then why are they doing everything they're doing? How can you justify cutting off your loved ones, going all in on this one man, all the sacrifices you have to make to support Trump? Even in terms of policy, how do you justify cuts to Medicaid and FEMA and all the ways the country is getting worse if you can't say, well, at least he's going after the deep state? For a right-wing conspiracy theorist, there's just too much riding on this. If Trump were to produce a grand list of Democrat pedophiles, if they all got hauled off to jail, then everything would have been worth it. Otherwise, they have spent a decade being continuously laughed at for nothing. All of the failures from the Trump administration would have been for nothing. They would have to contend with the idea that they were, in fact, tricked by a con man while everyone around them told them they were being tricked by a con man. It is so important to them that this is true, that Democrats, and again, only Democrats, are secret Satan-loving pedophiles who have been running a campaign of hoaxes against Donald Trump, the brave hero single-handedly fighting back. That's the only way you can justify something like storming the Capitol, right? I'm sorry to do this, but our head writer says, fuck you. So there's an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine where the disgraced fascist Cardassian military leader Gul Dukat, although Gul is a rank, so I don't know if it applies in the episode, but anyway, where Dukat starts a Pa-Wraith cult with a group of Bajoran followers. Bajorans are the species that the Cardassians have been oppressing or something like that, and the Pa-Wraiths are like their version of demons. So it's basically like a Hitler type starting a devil-worshipping cult. And Kira, she's one of the main characters who gets captured by the cult, keeps pointing out that Dukat is just so obviously grifting them, to the point that one of the followers is clearly pregnant with Gul Dukat's baby. And when he's about to be found out, he pulls a Jonestown that Kira thwarts. But even after Dukat is exposed, one of the followers still goes along with the suicide pact. He doesn't care that Dukat is a grifter. He's far too invested at that point. The message is sort of about how strong faith can be, which is why grifters are able to take advantage of it. Also, spoilers for that episode of a show from decades ago that is, well, just way too relevant.
By the early 2020s, there was a place like this in every major city in the United States.
Why are these people in here? Are they criminals?
You know, people with criminal records weren't allowed in the sanctuary districts.
Then what do they do to deserve this?
Nothing. Just people. Without jobs or places to live.
I mean, I'd argue that perhaps the show wasn't prophetic so much as it was tapping into political and social problems of the 90s that we've yet to solve. But anyway, Trump. You get my point about Trump. No matter how guilty he clearly is, there are going to be people who simply won't accept it. And a lot of that has to do with the fundamental nature of conspiracy theorists and how it ties to faith. We're going to do a break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about that a little bit. What is it about the conspiracy crowd that makes them so susceptible to Trump? Should be fun. I'll probably talk about the X-Files a bunch since we've already gotten on a 90s TV kick, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You know, when I started CastCast, my podcast about alternate fantasy casts of classic films, it felt like I had to do everything on my own. Setting up the mics, Googling the actors, calling up the actors and asking if they'd wear that white Marilyn Monroe dress just so I could get a feel on how they would play the role. It was exhausting, I tell ya. But all of that is behind me now with Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in these United States. They set me up with my own design studio so I can sell CastCast merch, like the CastCast cast. Perfect for collecting autographs from Kim Basinger and or Matthew Modine while injured. Wouldn't it have been interesting if those two had starred in Pulp Fiction? Yeah. Anyway, Shopify helps you create effective social media campaigns, and they also manage shipping and returns. So turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/more news. Go to shopify.com/more news. In the next episode of the CastCast, we're musing on what it would have been like to cast Rafe Fiennes in Liar Liar. Woo! Wild, right? We're kooky. Okay, one more time. Shopify.com/more news. Hit that ring-a-ding-ding again, Sam. Yes.
Greetings, my little news organisms. Fresh-faced little news organisms bubbling around in the primordial news soup. You're just emerging now into life itself, and before you grow any limbs, I want to talk to you about Ground News, a website and app we sought out to sponsor us because of how easy they make it to follow the news and compare coverage by different outlets. I've been working with Ground News for a long time, and that's for a reason. I think they're one of the most powerful solutions for seeing how different outlets are reporting on the same story, because here on Earth, every side has to have its spin. Oh, you have so much to learn, my single-celled friends. So, once you figure out what the internet is, go to ground.news/SMN. The link is in the... We're going to teach you how to use links, my little amoebas.
Guess what? Guess what? Guess what? Have you guessed it yet? Have you guessed? Oh, you must not have been paying attention because it is the summer of cinema, ya bozos, and Pluto TV is combusting with thousands of free movies. So what are you spending your time watching? Vines? No, 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 no. Feature-length films is where the vibe is at these days, my friends. Explosive action movies like Gladiator, Stealth, Star Trek. My, oh my, there's gum in my eye. The Linear Rotunda, Gladiator, The Printer That Works, and other tall tales. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Beverly Hills Cop, The Anthropomorphized AirPods, The Garage Sale Murders, A Trip to San Antone with Joey Fatone, Four Brothers, Good Burgers, and Squunch. Bring the action with you and stream for free on all your favorite devices. Pluto TV, stream now, pay never. Do you think I need to watch Skunk before checking out Squunch 2? I meant Squunch. Do you need... That's a yes. I need to watch Squunch before I can watch Squunch 2. It's gonna be a whole night of squunching, folks.
All right, final break is over, much like Trump. Canceled! All right, so Trump is the guiltiest man in the world. I think it's safe to say that, and it's pretty amazing that he backed himself into this hilarious corner. I mean, he's very stupid. He's always been very stupid. Guy doesn't even know the word enigma, some say. So it's not surprising that he would inadvertently link his campaign to the releasing of Epstein's client list despite likely being on that list himself. I honestly think Trump thought that people would forget once he got elected. Or maybe he knew it wouldn't matter at that point. Or perhaps his followers have just been so constantly willing to believe even the flimsiest of lies, Trump knew that he could find a way to squirm out of it. Or, as prophecy foretells, wriggle out of it. Because his followers want a reason to forgive him on this. So here's a question. Why are MAGA people so incredibly gullible? That is the word for them. I'm sorry, like, if you are or were a MAGA person, this is going to be tough to hear. Nobody wants to be conned by an obvious con man. But if it's becoming clear to you that in regards to this Epstein stuff, Trump is obviously the